Hello everyone, this is Defense Politics Asia and South China Sea issue. I'm definitely, you probably have heard me say it before. Many of you guys probably disagree with, my assessment of what is actually happening. And so this time around, I have the Singapore Defense Minister to explain the strategic situation in South China Sea. And you'll probably find it very familiar because it's going to sound a lot like what I tell you guys in my previous videos. But no, listen for yourself. This is actually this is during the Munich Security Conference that ended I think a month ago. So this guy on the left is the Singapore Defense Minister, Mr. Teo Ching
You started this session saying that we should focus on the South China Sea, and that's a good starting point. And rather than deal with specifics as you framed them, let me take a strategic view. Should we worry about the problems in the South China Sea, at least vis-a-vis presence? There's some worry and some figures. Chinese Coast Guard patrols have gone up. About 2,000 ships days, about 20% increase from last year to the previous. There's also the Chinese Maritime militia, average of about 200 Chinese militia vessels around disputed features, a 35% increase from 2022. The U.S.
So the fishing ship, that you always hear about, is the Chinese militia. The Chinese have this. They use fishing ships, to pretend to pretend they are to be fishing ships, but they are actually militias. They are actually manned most likely by the Chinese Navy, the Chinese soldiers, and but because they do not have the Navy yet, so this is also a soft way to claim that you see, our civilians are using these waters because this is our waters. This is our sovereign territory. That's what the Chinese like to do, and often instead of using the Navy ship or the Coast Guard to do blockade, because that can be seen as an act of war, they use these militia boats, which makes it very vague. It's in kind of a gray zone. So that's what the Chinese use, just in case you are not aware.
And obviously, as I'm reciting these figures, I think you get a sense of what's shaping up. For the U.S., since 2011, it's negotiated access to 12 new defense sites, Philippines, Australia, new installations in Japan, Guam. U.S. has now 140,000 military troops in Guam, Hawaii, Japan, and ROK, spread out around 29 military bases.
So this part is a shock to me. 140,000 troops. This is a huge army. 140,000 is a bigger army than a lot of military around the world. So that is easily this is just peacetime deployment. We're not even talking about wartime. This is peacetime deployment across 4-5 territories, and then across 29 bases. 140,000. That's a lot of troops.
Not only US and China, but European powers. Last December, before European powers, last December, the US deployed 3 aircraft carriers to the Asia Pacific ahead of the inauguration of President Trump, whether related or not. Europe has, as I said, stepped up its maritime activities. Italy and France deployed aircraft carriers to the region in 2024, and UK will do that this year. 2 German ships call onto ports in Philippines and Malaysia, and this is Germany's first naval engagement with these countries over 2 decades.
So some of these deployments, I think I have reported before on DPA. So you may remember, but I think most of you guys will not. I'm just saying.
The question to ask is, as you alluded to, what are the strategic goals of these players, apart from individual disputes? I think for the U.S. it's easy to understand. It aims to maintain its dominance as a Pacific power, and this is a position held since battling the Japanese in World War II. The U.S. seeks to achieve this by working with its allies in the Asia Pacific, Japan, Korea, and Australia. What about the European powers?
So it's interesting. He only noted 3 countries: Japan, Korea, and Australia, because these are the 3 allied countries of the United States that actually have military power. There's actually one more ally, which is not Singapore, because Singapore have a strong military. It's actually Philippines. So Philippines is actually also an ally of United States, but they don't have the military to really act as a good partner. So no, Singapore is not. I have to repeat again. I don't know how many times I need to say it. Singapore is not a treaty ally of the United States. Singapore, if you actually listen to the Singapore's Prime Minister or any ministers, whenever journalists say that, or anyone suggests that Singapore is a ally or military partner or something, they will correct the journalists immediately, because Singapore is not an ally of the United States. So I just want to say that.
They have significant interests in the Asia-Pacific. South China Sea sees an estimated 40% of EU foreign trade. And I think beyond economic interests, European powers are keen to signal to the US that they are reliable allies in the Asia-Pacific. The interesting point is what is strategic intent for China.
So before we go to the China part, the trust in the European powers have waned a lot, and particularly because of the Red Sea situation in regards to the Houthis. The inability of European navies to secure the Red Sea and to bring security to the Red Sea against the Houthis' attacks has probably eroded a lot of trust in European powers from the Americans. Like, the Americans just nowadays don't trust the Europeans as a military ally, which is also why Donald Trump basically forced the Europeans into spending more money by threatening to move out of Europe entirely, and basically make it very clear that the Europeans have to step up and take responsibility in the European affairs. So if not, then then they are not allies. They're just vessels.
And I would characterize this as going beyond just territorial assertions.
It's about China.
I think first, China's actions in the South China Sea, if we are frank about it, are a response to US containment strategy. It was a strategy that originated from the US campaign to contain the Japanese expansion in World War II. Second, China's presence in the South China Sea, I think, could be characterized as its own rendering of the Monroe Doctrine. China is not yet capable of enforcing its Monroe Doctrine in the South China Sea, but the aspiration is the same. In 2014.
So, for those that may not know about the Monroe Doctrine, is basically in the United States say that they must have full control over the Americas. So North America, Central America, perhaps even South America must be under US control. That's basically the Monroe Doctrine. So China have the same aspiration. This is something that I said before in open mics, in my videos, that eventually the Chinese will deploy their navy to assert their dominance once there is the lack of a balancing power from the United States. And when that happens, they can force any country to do whatever China wants. Yeah, including, let's say any country want to tariff China goods or don't want to trade with China, they can be forced open, just like how United States forced Japan open when Japan was still in the samurai era. So the Americans came in and then forced them to open their markets. So
2014, President Xi Jinping said, quote unquote, matters in Asia ultimately must be resolved by Asians, and Asia's security ultimately must be protected by Asians. This, at the root of it, is a Monroe Doctrine.
So the reason why Asian countries, particularly in Southeast Asia, don't take that statement well, is because if only Asians deal with Asian things, then the most powerful Asian country will dominate. And that's exactly what China wants. They want to dominate the diplomacy and the geopolitics in Asia. And this is also the same thing why China always say that no, they want to talk directly, one-to-one, bilateral treaties or bilateral negotiations. They don't want to negotiate on South China Sea issue, for example, with Philippines via a massive bloc like ASEAN. So because when they want to one, China is such a big power, they basically dominate any negotiations. It's the same thing as United States able to dominate any negotiations with any American countries, be it in North, Central, or South America. United States have that power because they are overwhelmingly powerful. Same thing, China wants the same thing, but no one is playing ball because all of Asia, particularly in East and Southeast Asia, do not trust China. So we always bring the Americans in. We always try to bring the Europeans in, or maybe the Indians in, to try to balance things out. Because if not, there is no negotiation positions to work with China.
I think that remains the China's view. Now, China is saddled with two conflicting goals. While it needs to show strength and power to the US and its allies, China also needs to manage its relations with its smaller neighbors in ASEAN. And on military strength, China has made dramatic strides and now has the largest maritime fighting force, at least in terms of numbers, about 234 warships to US's 219.
And that number is going to increase. China is going to build more Navy ships in order to ensure that they can absolutely win any naval wars. Because just now the number was only comparing with American Navy. American Navy cannot be all 100% deployed in the Pacific. So they already have some dominance. But the thing is, they are never going to fight United States alone. They will be fighting against Japan as well, South Korea, Taiwan, Philippines, and perhaps even Vietnam, Singapore, Indonesia. It will be the whole gang with India. So if a conflict happens in a major way, like say like a World War style way, then the Chinese Navy right now is not big enough. They can't deal with these many countries because once you have Japan fleet, South Korean fleet, and then combined with American fleet, Australian fleet, there's no way China is going to have that dominance that the numbers seem to suggest.
Its first homegrown aircraft carrier, the Fujian, is expected to be operationally ready this year. It conducted a dual carrier maneuver at sea for the first time with its two operational carriers, Liaoning and Shantung. This dichotomy about showing strength as well as trying to come in accommodation with its neighbors is affecting its relations, especially with its proximate neighbors, particularly claimant states. And that's the reason why negotiations on the South China Sea conduct have been protracted. If you remember in 2018, Premier Li Keqiang said that China should aim to conclude the COC within 3 years. It's 2025 and it's 7 years on and we're nowhere close to concluding it. As it stands, we are no closer to a solution and we're seeing tit for tat between China and other claimant states on the ground, especially the Philippines.
So I always say that most neighboring countries of China, as well as in Southeast Asia, and actually basically everyone, do not trust China. I said it many times in many different videos already, and this is the Singapore Defense Minister basically spelling it out as well. The same thing. The negotiations just cannot work out because no one can trust China. And because China have been so assertive, a lot of people, when I say that, a lot of people dispute, no, China is a peaceful country. They're not exactly what you think they are. They have been super militarily assertive in South China Sea, which is why there is this struggle, for the ASEAN countries to really trust China in terms of that?
Given a strategic overlay to what's happening, because I think unless you do that, you're just going to end up in multiple rounds of tit and tat concerns, and that usually isn't very productive. I think that's the dilemma that China will have to deal with, and and with the now pronouncement by Secretary Hegseth that the European military should step up their presence in Europe because the US military needs to be in Asia. I take that to mean that the US Department of Defense wants to increase its military presence even more so in Asia. I think the silver lining is that it wants to do that deterrence through strength to avoid war with China. Thank you.
So I say many times, the way to avoid war is to have a balance of power. The Chinese military has been getting stronger and stronger over the past 20 years, and to the point where now they're overwhelmingly powerful as compared to the neighboring countries. The whole of Southeast Asia combined is still weaker than Chinese military, and we're talking about like 10, 11 countries combined military. It will still be weaker than China military. You need South Korea and Japan, and Taiwan, and maybe that's just barely enough, but they're also spread out, and all the different countries are so spread out. So then you need the Americans to come in, and then you have some kind of balance. But the Chinese military is still continuing to improve and continue to get stronger. And this is also why United States need to pivot to Asia, like in serious form, like seriously pivot to Asia. And this is also why they're putting pressure on the Europeans, as the Americans do not see Russia as a threat. Russia is not a military threat to the United States. And they also do not believe Russia is going to invade into the rest of Europe. So which is why they're forcing the Europeans to do what they can for the Ukraine war situation and for the deterrence against Russia, because they need to build up their military because they now have an imbalance of power with Russia. So, and if the United States pull out, there will be an absolute imbalance of power. So, which is why they want to force the Europeans to spend more to either equal the power of Russia or at least even be stronger than Russia, so that at least conventionally, so that Russia will not think about invading into the rest of Europe, which I personally also do not think they would. Then the Americans can focus their attention on China, because China is the real strategic threat for United States, be it in any plane that you want to talk about, be it economic, trade, geopolitics, military, everything. China is a big competition to United States right now. So this is the question and answer part.
Minister Ng, did you want to answer the question on the role of middle powers or other powers?
I said the wrong name. I say he's Teo Chee Hean. He's not. He's Ng Eng Heng. So I called the wrong name. It's not Teo Chee Hean. It's Ng Eng Heng.
In the South China Sea, whether there's a constructive role for them to
You framed it that way. You framed it that way, and if you listen to my speech, we can go on and talk about shadow play. But if you don't accept that as a strategic imperative, then if this is just about territorial disputes, we won't need for us to be here. You could leave it to the countries.
Yeah.
And you either accept that there's strategic rivalry, the great game is going on in the South China Sea, or you don't. And whether there are mechanisms to reduce conflict, whether external powers are needed. I mean, those are all self-evident questions with self-evident answers. I think it's still in play, the strategic competition between the US and China. I don't think the US will go away. I've referred to the Monroe Doctrine, for those of you who remember the history. When President Monroe espoused that theory in 1823, the US was not in a position to enforce the Monroe Doctrine. It didn't have a navy big enough. In fact, the British Navy acted on behalf of the US to enforce it, because the British had rights too. It was not only 100 years later where the United States Navy was big enough to enforce it. I think that is both an aspiration of China, but also what strikes fear into other countries. When China is strong enough, what would it do? And it's up to China, I think, to assure its neighbors. I don't think it's difficult. I think China has paid a price for, as I said, that dilemma of exerting its presence to US and allies, such as deterrence, because China too wants to show deterrence by strength, as the US wants to. And it has to square that with its international position. I've always been impressed by the skillfulness of the Chinese foreign service, so I think it's well within their means, and I leave it to them to deal with their foreign policy.
Thank you.
Yeah, so that's the end of this video. So basically, he basically says what I've always been telling you guys. There is a innate fear in Southeast Asian countries. So don't talk about the East Asians, not the South Koreans or the Japanese. Don't talk about Taiwan. I know Taiwan is not part of Southeast Asia, but Southeast Asia alone is extremely suspicious of China, and because the Chinese have been overly aggressive in their foreign policies in regards to South China Sea and to their neighbors when there is dispute, and then in the strength of the pressure they put on the countries depends on who is actually in power in United States. When there is a strong precedent in United States, the Chinese weaken and try to be very nice to the neighboring countries. And then, but when there's a weak precedent in United States, China becomes very assertive, and this basically creates a lot of distrust in Southeast Asian countries and East Asian countries as well. Like South Korea and Japan is also recipient of such duplicitous foreign policies of the Chinese. So and so it is actually based on local countries, regional countries' experience, that they realize they are very unsure about what China actually wants to do. And Monroe Doctrine, if China wants absolute control, just like what India have over the Indian Ocean, if China wants that in the entire of Southeast Asia and the western part of Pacific Ocean, then why would they want to do it? Why would they need such absolute dominance in the entire half of Asia? And what would they use this power for? And the thing is, from all these little disputes that the Southeast Asian and the East Asian countries experience with China, that creates the distrust, because China always punishes the neighboring countries when they do something that China don't like. Now, I'm not saying that they cannot do it. Like, for example, South Korea want to put a THAAD missile, and then to air defense systems, and then China basically ban Chinese tourists to South Korea. It is this kind of little thing, the little things that make all these countries very, very distrustful of China, because China is not aware that they are a big country. It's very weird. China have this dual personality, where on one hand they are a big country. They know they are a big country. They know they are powerful, so they will flex their muscle, and they want to behave like the big country that they historically has been, because Chinese empires in the past historically had always been the superpower, and almost half of the time is the absolute dominant force in the eastern half of Asia. Not so much in Southeast Asia, only sometimes, because they seldom sail south of the South China Sea. But when you have, let me think. Yeah, I almost forgot what I was going to say. So, but the other half of China, they because of the geopolitics, because China has been so weak, no, they are always facing massive powers. They have been dealing with the United States right after World War II because they were supporting North Korea. And then they went into a war with the Soviet Union. They have always been this underdog in the great power competition. So they have this inferiority complex where makes them doubt themselves. And then they forget that they are a big power when they're dealing with smaller countries. So they will overreact to things, not realizing that while they are trying to like what Mr. Ng said regarding to show strength as a deterrence, they are showing the strength to United States is not strength to the smaller countries like Japan, South Korea, or any of the Southeast Asian countries. It looks freaking scary to the smaller countries. So while for example, the THAAD missile situation of South Korea, that was many years ago. China punishes South Korea, but that was actually to attack the Americans, to basically show strength to American. But that strike fear into South Korea, and this kind of fear lasts a long time. As such, it becomes a national policy for South Korea to always be mindful of China. And this applies to Japan, applies to Taiwan, then applies to Philippines, and just like Philippines, the most recent one is always the Philippines because of South China Sea, how assertive the Chinese Navy is against Philippines. It's like Philippines will never ever be a military threat to China, but China, despite no one can exploit the South China Sea because of all these disputes, China chose to assert their sovereignty over South China Sea and put a lot of pressure on Philippines. But they don't have to do it because eventually, if United States make some wrong political move and they collapse as a superpower, they become a regional power only in the Americas, then naturally China will become the dominant power. China don't even need to try. But the thing is, the Chinese have been trying too hard. As a result, they have been pressuring Philippines, and now Philippines become totally paranoid. And there's zero universe that Philippines will ever trust the Chinese. And this fear and distrustfulness from multiple countries already, from Taiwan to South Korea to Japan, to Philippines, it will spread like a virus. And this, of course, includes Vietnam as well. Vietnam also super distrustful of the Chinese, but they are very good at foreign policy. Their diplomacy is very good. They try to strike a balance to build trust with China, but at the same time, they build their military to make sure that in time of war with China, they can stand their own. But this fear, this aura, is spreads, you see, and all this assertive action by China, especially in regard to South China Sea, basically triggered Indonesia into a militarization, into a very serious militarization. Indonesia's military right now is militarizing, and a lot of the weaponry they are buying is modeled after the Singapore military. So basically, they have everything Singapore have now, almost. I think except for HIMARS, I think they have basically, they have F-16s. They are now considering buying F-15s, I think. And then, they have Leopard tanks as well. So, and then they have, I think they have Apache. So, they are basically modernizing and militarizing. And the enemy is not Singapore nor Australia. The target, the deterrence is against China. So, so hopefully this video is helpful for you to understand the situation in South China Sea. I know there is a lot of anti-United States, anti-US or pro-China content out there that maybe overly anti-China content out there that makes you sway a certain way. But reality is different. DPA here always talk about the reality. Just like the Ukraine war, I wouldn't change. So I have my distrustful of China, but there is also reasons for that. It's because of all this history. So, and this is my defense minister saying it. So hopefully that helps to put another perspective to it. So anyway, thank you for watching. Press the like button, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next update.